Everybody likes a second chance, don't you? In my house, my kids get second chances every once in a while. It's usually like, do you want to try to say that again? And hopefully they heed that warning and say it better the second time. But Lori and I also give each other second chances. Have you ever gotten in that discussion where you say, well, that's not what I meant, and they say, well, that's not what you said? And so we have a rule. You get a second chance to say what you actually meant. That benefits me more than it benefits her, but I am thankful for second chances. Today, I want to take a look at the possibility of a second chance for John Mark. We find it in Acts chapter 15, verse 36. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let's return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John, called Mark, but Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. There's a disagreement. Barnabas wanted to give John Mark a second chance. Paul thought it best not to take somebody with them who had bailed on them in the first missionary journey. You go back to Acts chapter 13, you find that they begin this journey. They go to Cyprus, and they make it across the water again. And that's when John Mark decides, hey, I'm headed back to Jerusalem. I'm headed back home. And so Paul's like, I don't want to risk that again. Barnabas, the one who's the son of encouragement, the one who gave Paul a chance after Paul had been persecuting the church. Barnabas, we would expect Barnabas to give John Mark a second chance. And Barnabas does give that second chance. And now this isn't the whole story, though, is it? Well, we know a whole lot more about John Mark than just this. We back up in the book of Acts to chapter 12, and we find that Peter's in prison. The believers are gathered together praying for him. It's this miraculous deal where the angel comes and leads Paul out of prison. And they end up at the house where everybody's praying. And whose house is it? It's Mary's house. Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark. The church met at his house there in Jerusalem. He had a front row seat to the beginning of the church. And he did get to start off on that first missionary journey. He came back for a reason we don't know about, but obviously Paul's not happy about it, whatever that reason was. And then here, as they're about to set off again, he gets another chance. Now, Barnabas gives him that chance because it's in keeping with Barnabas' character. But we also find out in Colossians chapter 4 that Barnabas is his cousin. They're family. They're related to one another. And so as they head out on their part of the journey, where they go to where Barnabas is from. Barnabas is from Cyprus. They head that direction for some very specific reasons. And then Paul goes on his journey, and that would be the end of the story if Paul hadn't written letters. But Paul thankfully writes to the churches, and along the way, he mentions John Mark a number of times. Probably the most significant among them, what we find in 2 Timothy. There in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11, we find that he says, Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. So by this point, we find that Mark has become useful in ministry. That whatever his past was isn't his present. That he has gone on to be incredibly useful for the sake of the gospel. And then if you go on to Philemon, verse 24, you find that Mark is with Paul. They minister alongside one another. And so there's reconciliation there as well. Paul ends up giving him a second chance. Not only that, you go over to Peter's letters, and we find that he's a companion of Peter as well. I mean, so Mark is an impressive person in the life of the New Testament. I mean, the early church met in his house. He went on part of the first missionary journey. He went on a missionary journey with Barnabas. He's a companion of Paul. He's a companion of Peter. And then if we go beyond all this, we don't know for a fact, but there's strong speculation that this same Mark is the one who wrote the very first gospel. You see, the Gospel of Mark is the first one ever recorded. And it's thought that whoever wrote the Gospel of Mark was a close companion of Peter and wrote down Peter's words of what happened when he followed after Jesus. And we know that Mark was with Peter. He was a companion of him. The age of Mark fits well because there's a small story right when Jesus is being arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And there's a young boy who gets grabbed by one of the soldiers, and he runs away and leaves his cloak behind. And it's thought that that's whoever writes the Gospel of Mark. And so it's very possible that this Mark was there in the garden, that this Mark wrote the Gospel. So he went from one who, checked out on the first missionary journey to one who gave us the Gospel that's still read today. I don't know about you, but I am thankful for second chances.